Okay, let's talk about a story. The story we're going to talk about is the short story Elephant by Raymond Carver. Now, what this story does is it explores the tension between freedom and responsibility through the tale of a man who is supporting his entire family, it seems, with a series of financial loans they'll never pay back and which are basically crushing him. But when you look at this, it's about more than just Carver showing the tension between freedom and responsibility. What he's really interested in here, and what he really tells in this story, is how the two concepts of freedom and responsibility tangle, right? And how that crushing grip of responsibility can actually be the true freedom that we seek. So the story itself begins with a man talking about the $500 loan he decides to make to his brother. And soon we find out that he's making regular payments to his mother, to his adult daughter, adult son, and to his wife. In the last case, that's legally mandated because of the divorce, but in all the others, he gives it voluntarily, though he feels compelled to do it. So already here's this tension between being compelled to do something and being free to do something. And I think he best captures this sort of tangling and this tension when he describes why he makes a loan to his brother. He says, to make a long story short, I sent him the money. I had to. I felt I had to at any rate, which amounts to the same thing. The question of feeling forced to give him the money, trapped by his family's unquenchable needs, right? This is an interesting one because the narrator feels backed into a corner. His brother never pays him back, his son, daughter, and all. They keep asking him for more and more money, right? And as he puts it, I was paying out nearly as much money every month as I was bringing in. You don't have to be a genius or know anything about economics to understand that this state of affairs couldn't keep on. But in some ways, couldn't we argue that he needs his family just as much as they need him? That he, in fact, needs to be needed? When we learn more about his backstory, we find out that he, like many Carver characters, is a recovering alcoholic. It would seem he may have a lot to make up for it from his past, given at least the one horrifying incident that we learn about, this memory that's revealed in a dream. Then suddenly I found myself in the company of some people I didn't know, and the next thing that happened was that I was kicking the window out of my son's car and threatening his life, as I did once a long time ago. He was inside the car as my shoe smashed through the glass. So perhaps being trapped in this state of financial bondage to his family is actually the narrator's choice, a way for him to make amends for this ugly past, for his past sins. He tells us now that he's a responsible, employed adult, and he recognizes this relative good fortune. As he puts it, I had a job, didn't I? Compared to her and everyone else in my family, I had made it. Compared to the rest, I lived on Easy Street. It's easy then to conclude that now he wants to redeem himself by playing the heroic role in his family, in which case, this is all a choice, not simply a burden thrust upon him. Or if you want to further tangle the freedom and responsibility themes here, perhaps even this choice is a form of compulsion, right? Given what we know about addiction and the way alcoholics replace one addiction with another, you could argue that he is now addicted to being needed. So the first dream that the narrator has in this story, which is also a memory, it deepens our understanding of this freedom and responsibility conflict. In it, he remembers sitting on his father's shoulders and riding him like an elephant. And as he's clinging to his father's head in fear, his father tells him, you can let go. I've got you. You won't fall. When he lets go, the narrator holds his arms out to the sides and he feels his father's grip protecting him. He is free. He is safe. He is supported. As Carver describes it, when he said that, I became aware of the strong grip of his hands around my ankles. Then I did let go. I turned loose and held my arms out on either side of me. The narrator is free to let go because his father is supporting him, much in the same way he is supporting his family now. Now, this memory, which is clearly central to the story given its title, right, it lends credence to the reading that the narrator's financial trap or burden is in part self-made, right? He wants to be like his father. He wants to provide that same kind of unshakable support. Yet, we know he also still yearns to be carried in the way his father carried him. At the end of the story, after he entertains a brief fantasy of fleeing his obligations and running off to Australia, he reconciles himself to his fate. As Carver says it, the truth was, I wouldn't be going there any more than I'd be going to Timbuktu, the moon, or the North Pole. Hell, I didn't want to go to Australia. But once I understood this, once I understood I wouldn't be going there, or anywhere else for that matter, I began to feel better. And with this acceptance comes a kind of peace. However, as he walks to work, he stops in the parking lot where he physically revisits that feeling of being on his father's shoulders. Let's look at the passage. I decided to put the lunch pail down for a minute. I did that, and then I raised my arms, raised them up level with my shoulders. I was standing there like that, like a goof. Goof or not, the pose and the scene that follows embody the complex, ironic relationship that Carver has established between freedom and responsibility here. It is at once a celebration of the narrator's freedom in accepting his burden and a fantasy of escape, of being carried and protected without any burdens of his own. So let's consider for a moment what would really happen if the narrator did indeed flee his burdens and go to Australia. What would be likely to happen to a recovering alcoholic with no constraints on his behavior, keeping him on the straight and narrow? He would lose control of his life, probably. Take another drink, fall off the wagon. Carver even hints at this when the narrator reveals what frightened him most about that violent dream. It wasn't kicking in the window. It was this. In the second dream, somebody had offered me some whiskey, and I drank it. Drinking that whiskey was the thing that scared me. That was the worst thing that could have happened. That was rock bottom. Seen this way, we can truly understand that his responsibility actually gives him the freedom and security that his father's grip once did. Without the grip of responsibility, he would likely descend into the illusory freedom of taking a drink, which is itself a form of compulsion, of control, a burden, right? So ironically, the grip of the responsibility is the thing that frees him to sit safely with his arms wide. The burden is the safety and the freedom. As a provider, the narrator can be seen as the elephant, but he is also the rider of that elephant, somehow protected and empowered by the obligation to provide for his family. Then we do have that final scene, which is worth looking at. The narrator's friend, George, sees him standing like that in the parking lot, and he comes and he picks him up in a car he recently souped up but hasn't paid for yet, And the story ends with the two of them racing off, dangerously joyriding and enjoying this fleeting moment of freedom. So let's look at that passage. He had it floored, and we were going flat out. We streaked down that road in his big, unpaid-for car. This closing image further complicates the notions of freedom and responsibility. The narrator in this moment is free. He's free from the looming debt of the car, free from the responsibility of its reckless speed, and yet he is not in control, not at the wheel, and therefore in more danger. It's thrilling, but it's hollow and unsustainable at best, and even a kind of a trap. And we know that he has chosen to go back to carrying the burden because that position, ironically, gives him the most freedom and safety. In this way, Carver has crafted Elephant into a complex meditation on how the responsibilities that anchor us somehow make us free, and how the fantasy of freedom can sometimes be a cage.